What happens when a seasoned political commentator meets a comedian who refuses to stay in his lane, and neither one backs down on live television? That's exactly what unfolded in this moment. And trust me, no one in that studio was ready for how quickly things escalated. Make sure to subscribe to Talk Show Fallout, and like and comment for more talk show coverage. So let's get into this, the host says, leaning slightly forward, smiling in that controlled daytime TV way. We have a very special guest with us today. Trevor Noah is here. Audience applauds, some louder than others. Trevor walks out, relaxed, smiling, giving a small wave. He sits, adjusts his mic, nods to everyone at the table. Thanks for having me, he says casually. Sunny Hostin gives a polite smile, but there's already a sharpness in her eyes. We're glad you're here, she replies, tone measured. The host jumps in quickly. Trevor, you've been very vocal recently about media narratives and political framing. You said something interesting in your latest appearance, that sometimes the loudest voices in media don't always represent the most accurate perspectives. Trevor nods. Yeah, look, I think we live in a time where being right is sometimes less important than being loud. And unfortunately, television, this format included, can reward that. There's a slight shift at the table. Sunny tilts her head. Are you including this show in that criticism? Trevor pauses for just a second. Not long, but enough. I think every show has moments like that, he says. Not just this one. Audience murmurs. That was diplomatic, but not really. Sunny leans in a bit. Because I think it's important to be clear, she says, her voice firm now. This show is about informed discussion. We don't just shout opinions, we back them up. Trevor nods slowly. And that's great when it happens. That line lands differently. The audience reacts, some laughs, some ohs. The host quickly raises a hand. Okay, let's keep it friendly, she says, smiling but clearly sensing the tension. Sunny doesn't smile. What do you mean by when it happens? She asks directly. Trevor shifts slightly in his chair. Still calm. I mean exactly what I said. There are times when conversations on shows like this become more about emotional reaction than factual discussion. Sunny's eyebrows lift. Are you saying we're emotional instead of factual? I'm saying, Trevor replies, choosing his words carefully, that sometimes emotion drives the narrative more than facts. And that's not unique to you, it's across media. Sunny exhales, a short laugh. That sounds like a very convenient generalization. Trevor smiles slightly. It's not convenient, it's observable. Audience reacts again, this time louder. The host jumps in. Let's bring this back a bit. Sunny, I know you have strong thoughts on this. Oh, I do, Sunny says immediately, turning fully toward Trevor now. Because what you're saying sounds like a critique without accountability. You're pointing fingers at media, but you're part of media too. Trevor nods. Absolutely. So where's your accountability? She presses. It's in acknowledging that I can be wrong, Trevor says. And in trying to approach topics with nuance rather than certainty. Sunny leans back slightly, but her gaze stays locked. Nuance is great in theory. But in reality, people rely on platforms like this for clarity. They don't want comedians dancing around issues, they want answers. Trevor lets out a small breath, almost amused. I think that's where we disagree. I don't think people should look to television, especially talk shows, for absolute answers. That line hits harder than anything before. The audience reacts again, this time more divided. Sunny's expression tightens. So what are we here for then? Trevor shrugs lightly. Discussion. Perspective. Not authority. There's a pause. A real one. The host glances between them, sensing the shift. Okay, this is getting interesting, she says, trying to lighten the mood. But Sunny isn't letting it go. No, she says, turning back to Trevor. Because what you're implying is that what we do here lacks value. Trevor shakes his head slightly. That's not what I'm saying. It sounds like it, she insists. I'm saying, Trevor continues, voice still calm but firmer now, that sometimes the format of shows like this encourages quick reactions over deep analysis. And that can lead to oversimplification. Sunny leans forward again. Or maybe it leads to clarity. Trevor raises an eyebrow. Clarity or certainty? Those aren't the same thing, she fires back. Not always, he says. The audience reacts, this time a mix of applause and murmurs. The host steps in again. Okay, let's pause for a second, because this is clearly a passionate topic. But the tension is already set. Sunny crosses her arms slightly. I just think it's easy to sit back and critique when you're not in the position of having to inform people daily. Trevor nods slowly. And I think it's dangerous to assume that informing people means presenting things as black and white. That line lands heavy. There's a noticeable shift in the room now. Even the audience quiets down a bit. Sunny tilts her head again, but this time there's less curiosity and more challenge. So you think we present things as black and white? I think, Trevor says carefully, that sometimes strong opinions can come across that way, especially when there's little room for opposing nuance. Sunny lets out a short laugh. Opposing nuance? We have debates on this show every single day. Trevor nods. Yes, but debates don't always equal understanding. That one gets a louder reaction. The host looks slightly overwhelmed now. Okay, wow, she says, half laughing. We were not expecting this level of heat this early. But Sunny doesn't break eye contact. Let me ask you something, she says, voice steady but intense. Do you think you're more qualified to analyze these issues than the people sitting at this table? Trevor pauses again, this time longer. And when he speaks, the tone shifts just a bit. No, he says. I think I'm more comfortable admitting what I don't know. The audience reacts instantly. Some applause, some gasps. Sunny's expression hardens slightly. That's a very polished answer, she says. Trevor smiles faintly. It's an honest one. The tension is no longer subtle. It's right there, out in the open. The host tries again to steer things. Okay. This is clearly a bigger conversation than we expected. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, she glances at both of them. We're continuing this, because I don't think either of you is done. The audience applauds, louder now, energized by the conflict. Trevor leans back slightly, still composed. Sunny adjusts her notes, but her focus doesn't leave him. And as the cameras begin to pull back, you can feel it. This isn't just a disagreement anymore. It's about to become something much bigger. The cameras come back on, and you can feel it immediately. The energy hasn't dropped at all. If anything, it's sharper now. The audience is quieter than before, like everyone's waiting for the next moment to hit. The host smiles, but it's tighter this time. Welcome back. So, things got a little heated before the break. A few laughs from the audience. Trevor lets out a small chuckle, leaning slightly forward. A little. Sunny doesn't laugh. I think it was a necessary conversation, she says, her tone composed but clearly still charged. The host nods quickly. Right, so let's pick this up carefully. She turns to Trevor. You said something before the break that really stuck out. You said you're more comfortable admitting what you don't know. Sunny seemed to take issue with that. Sunny jumps in before the host can even finish. Because it sounds good, she says. But in practice, it can also be a way of avoiding accountability. Trevor looks at her, calm but focused. Avoiding accountability, how? Well, Sunny continues, if you position yourself as someone who doesn't know, then you're never really responsible for being wrong. The audience reacts, some nodding, a few claps. Trevor tilts his head slightly. I think that's the opposite of what I'm saying. Sunny folds her hands together on the table. Then explain it. There's a slight pause, but Trevor doesn't rush. Saying I don't know is taking responsibility, he says. Because it means you're not pretending to have answers you don't actually have. Sunny shakes her head. But people don't tune in to hear uncertainty. They tune in for perspective. And perspective, Trevor replies, should include uncertainty when it exists. That lands, but Sunny isn't backing down. So then what's the point of having a platform? She presses. If every answer is maybe, it depends. I'm not sure. How is that helpful? Trevor leans forward slightly now. Because reality is complex. And simplifying it too much can actually mislead people. The audience gives a mixed reaction again, some applause, some murmurs. The host raises her hand slightly. Okay, but let me push back on that just a little, she says. Because part of what we do here is make complex issues understandable. Trevor nods. And that's valuable. But, the host continues, are you saying that in doing that, we sometimes cross a line? Trevor hesitates for a moment. Not because he doesn't know what to say, but because he knows exactly what he's about to say. Yes, he says. The audience reacts immediately, louder this time. Sunny leans in again. That's a strong statement. It is, Trevor agrees. But I think it's an honest one. Sunny's voice sharpens just slightly. Or it's an easy one. Because you're critiquing without having to sit in this seat every day and make those decisions. Trevor doesn't flinch. I've sat in a seat where millions of people watch what I say every night, he replies. I understand the pressure. Sunny responds quickly. That's different. You were doing satire. And satire, Trevor says, often involves more research than people realize. That line gets a reaction, some laughter, some claps. Sunny lets out a short breath. So now you're implying that what we do isn't as researched. I'm saying, Trevor responds, keeping his tone even, that different formats prioritize different things. Comedy allows for more time to build context. Live discussions don't always have that luxury. Sunny's eyes narrow slightly. So again, you're pointing out a limitation, but not offering a solution. Trevor nods slowly. Because I don't think there's a perfect solution. That answer clearly frustrates her. So we just accept that, she asks. We just accept that conversations might be incomplete or oversimplified. Trevor leans back slightly. I think we acknowledge it, and we try to improve where we can. Sunny shakes her head again, this time with a faint smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. That sounds like a very safe answer. Trevor smiles back, but there's a hint of steel in it now. And pushing for absolute certainty can be a very dangerous one. The audience reacts louder. This is the strongest moment so far. The host quickly steps in. Okay, let's slow this down just a bit, she says, raising both hands slightly. Because I think what's happening here is actually really important. She turns to Sunny. You're saying people need clarity and strong perspectives. Sunny nods immediately. Yes. Then the host turns to Trevor. And you're saying people need nuance and acknowledgement of complexity. Trevor nods. Exactly. The host looks between them. So is this really a disagreement, or just two different approaches? There's a brief pause. Sunny answers first. It's a disagreement, she says firmly. Because at some point, you have to take a stand. Trevor responds just as quickly. And at some point, you have to admit that your stand might not be complete. That line lands hard. The audience reacts again, some applause, some audible wow. Sunny leans forward, her voice more intense now. Do you think I don't consider complexity before I speak? Trevor shakes his head. I didn't say that. But you're implying it, she says. I'm saying, Trevor replies, that the format sometimes rewards strong, definitive statements more than thoughtful uncertainty. Sunny doesn't look convinced. Or maybe it rewards confidence. Trevor nods. Confidence is good. Overconfidence isn't. That gets another reaction. The host glances at the audience, then back at the table. Okay, I have to ask, because I think people watching right now are wondering this. She looks at Trevor. Do you think shows like this do more harm than good? There's a noticeable shift in the room again. Trevor takes a breath before answering. No, he says. I think they do a lot of good. Sunny watches him closely. But, Trevor continues, I also think they have a responsibility to recognize their influence and the impact of how conversations are framed. Sunny responds immediately. We do recognize that. Trevor nods. Then the question becomes, are we always using that influence responsibly? That line hits like a spark. The audience reacts, this time louder than before. Sunny's posture stiffens. Are you questioning my responsibility? Trevor looks directly at her. I'm questioning the system, not you personally. But I'm part of that system, she says. And so am I, Trevor replies. There's a pause. A real one. The host looks like she's about to jump in, but doesn't. Sunny speaks again, more measured this time, but still firm. I just think it's interesting, she says, that you're sitting here critiquing the very platform that's giving you a voice right now. Trevor smiles slightly. I think that's the best place to have the conversation. The audience reacts, some applause, some laughter. Sunny doesn't react. She just looks at him for a moment, then says quietly, or maybe it's the easiest. Trevor tilts his head. You think this is easy? Sunny shrugs slightly. For you? Yes. That lands differently. Trevor leans forward again, this time with a bit more intensity than before. You think it's easy to come onto a show like this and challenge the way it operates? Sunny meets his gaze. I think it's easier than being the one who has to defend it every day. The tension is at its peak now. Even the audience seems unsure how to react, some clapping, some silent. The host finally steps in, more firmly this time. Okay, we're going to pause right there, she says, her voice cutting through the moment. She looks at both of them. Because this is clearly not over. The audience lets out a mix of laughter and applause. And when we come back, the host adds, we're going to bring in another perspective, because I think this conversation just got a lot bigger than the two of you. Trevor leans back again, but his expression is more serious now. Sunny looks down briefly at her notes, then back up, focused, composed, but clearly not finished. And as the cameras start to pull away again, one thing is obvious. This isn't cooling down. It's building. The show comes back from break, and this time the energy feels different. Heavier, more focused. The audience applause is still there, but it fades quicker than before, like everyone knows this isn't just a casual segment anymore. The host takes a breath before speaking. All right, we're back, and as promised, we're continuing this conversation. Because clearly, there's a lot to unpack here. She glances down the table. We've brought in another perspective, someone who's been listening closely backstage. A co-host, who hasn't spoken much earlier, leans forward now. Yeah, I've been watching this, and I think both of you are making strong points, but I also think you're talking past each other a little. Trevor nods slightly. That's fair. Sunny doesn't respond right away. She's still focused. The co-host continues. Trevor, you're talking about nuance, uncertainty, complexity. Sunny, you're talking about clarity, responsibility, and impact. Those don't have to cancel each other out. Sunny turns toward her. They don't, but in practice they often do. Trevor looks over. Only if we treat them like opposites. The co-host raises her hand slightly. Okay, but let me ask something directly, because I think this is where viewers might be confused. She looks at Trevor. When you say shows like this can oversimplify, do you think that leads to misinformation? There's a slight shift in Trevor's posture. He knows this is a sharper question. It can, he says. Not intentionally, but yes, it can. The audience reacts, some louder than before. Sunny immediately turns back to him. That's a serious accusation. Trevor shakes his head. It's not an accusation, it's a possibility. Sunny responds quickly. Words matter. When you say something like that on national television, people hear it as a statement, not a possibility. Trevor nods. That's exactly my point. That line hits, and the audience reacts instantly. Sunny pauses for a split second, then leans in again. No, your point is that we need to be careful. My point is that we are careful. Trevor keeps his voice steady. And I'm saying that even when you're careful, the format itself can create pressure to simplify. Sunny's tone sharpens again. So now it's the format's fault? Trevor doesn't hesitate. Partly yes. The audience reacts, this time louder, more divided. The host steps in, but not to stop it, just to guide it. Okay, let's stay with that, she says. Trevor, explain what you mean by the format. Trevor nods, turning slightly toward her but still aware of Sunny beside him. You have limited time, multiple voices, and the need to keep the conversation engaging. That naturally pushes people towards stronger, shorter, more definitive statements. Sunny interrupts. Or it pushes people to be clear. Trevor glances at her. Clear and simplified aren't always the same. Sunny shakes her head. You keep coming back to that, as if simplifying something automatically makes it wrong. I didn't say it makes it wrong, Trevor replies. I said it can make it incomplete. The co-host nods slowly. That's an important distinction. Sunny looks at her briefly, then back at Trevor. But incomplete doesn't mean misleading. Trevor pauses. Sometimes it does. That line lands hard again. The audience reacts, some gasps, some applause. Sunny's expression tightens. Give me an example. There's a brief silence. This is the moment where everything either escalates or settles. Trevor doesn't rush. I think when complex issues are reduced to quick takes, he says, it can create the impression that there are only two sides, or that the answer is obvious when it isn't. Sunny responds immediately. But that's not unique to this show. That's how public discourse works. Trevor nods. Exactly. And that's the problem. That gets a louder reaction. This is turning into a back and forth that the audience is fully locked into now. Sunny leans forward again, her voice steady but intense. So what are you suggesting? That we stop having discussions because they're not perfect. Trevor shakes his head. No, I'm suggesting we acknowledge the limitations while we have them. Sunny lets out a small, frustrated laugh. You keep saying that, but it still sounds like criticism without direction. Trevor's tone shifts slightly, still calm, but more direct now. And you keep defending a system as if acknowledging its flaws somehow weakens it. That line hits harder than anything before. The audience reacts loudly, some clapping, some whoa. Sunny sits back for a moment, then leans forward again, slower this time. I'm not defending flaws, she says. I'm defending the intention behind what we do. Trevor nods. And I respect that. But, she presses. But intention doesn't always equal impact, he says. There it is. The moment shifts again, this time deeper, more personal. Sunny's voice lowers slightly, but it's more intense than before. Do you think my impact is harmful? Trevor looks at her directly. I think your impact is significant. That's not what I asked, she says. The audience goes quiet. Trevor pauses. This is the longest pause so far. I think, he says carefully, that anyone with a platform has moments where their impact can be misinterpreted or incomplete. Including me. Sunny doesn't look satisfied. That's not an answer. It is, Trevor says. It's just not the one you want. That line lands, and the audience reacts again, louder than before. Sunny's composure cracks just slightly, not in a dramatic way, but enough to feel real. No, she says, it's not the one I want. It's the one that avoids actually addressing the question. Trevor leans forward again, matching her intensity now, because the question is framed in a way that assumes there's a simple yes or no answer. Sunny responds instantly. Sometimes there is. And sometimes there isn't, Trevor says. The co-host jumps in, sensing how close this is getting to the edge. Okay, let's take a step back for a second, she says. Because I think this is where the conversation gets tricky. She looks at Sunny. You're asking for accountability. Sunny nods. Yes. Then she looks at Trevor. And you're pushing back on the idea of simple accountability in complex situations. Trevor nods. Exactly. The host adds, so is the real issue here how we define responsibility. There's a pause. Sunny speaks first. Responsibility means standing by what you say and being clear about it. Trevor follows. Responsibility also means recognizing when what you say might not capture the full picture. The audience reacts, this time more thoughtful than explosive. Sunny crosses her arms slightly, but her voice is calmer now. I think viewers are smart enough to understand complexity. Trevor nods. I agree. Then why assume they're being misled? She asks. Trevor responds quietly, but firmly. Because even smart people can be influenced by how information is presented. That line lands differently, less explosive, more reflective. There's a brief silence at the table. The host looks between them, then out at the audience. This is a lot, she says, almost under her breath. A few laughs break the tension slightly. But Sunny isn't done. She turns back to Trevor one more time. I just think it's interesting, she says, that you've spent this entire segment critiquing the way we operate, but you haven't acknowledged the value we bring. Trevor looks at her, and this time his answer comes immediately. I did, he says. You just didn't hear it. That lands. Hard. The audience reacts, loud, sharp, divided. Sunny's expression freezes for a moment. Not shocked, but caught off guard. The host immediately steps in. Okay, wow. All right. She lets out a breath, half laughing but clearly trying to regain control. We are running out of time in this segment, she looks at both of them. But I have a feeling this conversation isn't staying on this table. The audience applauds, loud, energized, fully aware they just witnessed something real. Trevor leans back, exhaling slowly. Sunny looks forward, composed again, but the tension hasn't left. And as the cameras begin to pull back one more time, you can feel it. This isn't just a debate anymore. It's about to spill beyond the show. When the show returns for the final segment, the energy in the room has shifted again. But this time it's not sharp, it's heavy. The kind of quiet that only happens after something intense has already played out. The host takes a breath before speaking. All right, we're back. And I think it's safe to say this has been one of the most honest conversations we've had in a while. There's a light ripple of applause from the audience, but it's more restrained now. Trevor sits back, hands loosely together, calm but clearly still engaged. Sunny sits upright, composed, but there's a seriousness in her expression that wasn't there at the start. The host looks between them. Before we wrap, I want to give both of you a chance to just say where you stand now. After everything we've talked about. She turns to Sunny first. Sunny. Sunny nods slightly, taking a second before speaking. I think conversations like this are important, she says. Even when they're uncomfortable. The audience murmurs in agreement. But I also want to be clear, she continues, her tone steady. What we do here matters. The discussions we have, the perspectives we share, they have real impact. And I stand by that. A small round of applause follows. She glances briefly at Trevor. Do we get everything perfect every time? No, but that doesn't mean we're not thoughtful about it. Trevor listens without interrupting, nodding once. The host then turns to him. Trevor. He leans forward slightly, hands resting on the table now. I agree with that, he says. I think what you do matters. There's a slight shift in the room. People are listening closely now. And I want to be clear too, Trevor continues. My intention wasn't to dismiss the value of this show or the work that any of you do. Sonny watches him carefully, but doesn't interrupt. My point, he says, is that when something has that much influence, it's worth constantly questioning how it's used. Not because it's bad, but because it's powerful. The audience responds with a mix of applause and thoughtful murmurs. Sonny speaks again, this time more measured than before. And I don't disagree with that, she says. But I think there's a difference between questioning something and framing it in a way that suggests it's fundamentally flawed. Trevor nods. That's fair. That simple acknowledgement softens the moment, just a little. But I also think, Trevor adds, that recognizing flaws doesn't mean something is broken. It just means it can evolve. The host smiles slightly. Okay, I like that. That's a good place to meet. A few audience members clap. For the first time in a while, there's a hint of balance at the table. But the tension hasn't completely disappeared. It's just changed form. The host looks out toward the audience. You can probably tell, this conversation is layered. And I have a feeling people at home are going to have a lot to say about it. A few laughs, a few claps. And speaking of that, she continues, we actually checked social media during the break. That line gets a bigger reaction. People lean in slightly. And let's just say, the host adds with a small smile, people are already reacting. A screen off to the side lights up with selected comments. The host reads a few aloud. One viewer says, this is the kind of real discussion we need, no filters. Applause. Another says, Trevor is making a strong point about nuance. More applause mixed. And then this one, she says, glancing at Sonny briefly. Sonny is right, people need clarity, not confusion. The audience reacts, this time more divided, some clapping, some murmuring. Sonny gives a small nod. That's exactly my point. Trevor smiles slightly. And,